circling is a very powerful dimension and paradigm because, first of all, it acknowledges the fact that some energies are too delicate or too big for one or two people to broach and digest. If you think of trauma or PTSD, for example, or rage, it's too big for two people to deal with. It's definitely too big for one person to deal with. However, it's like a voltage exchange. So if you put 280 volts into your iPhone, it will melt the iPhone. Why? Is it because the electricity is bad? Is it because the iPhone is bad? Or is it because that voltage at that intensity is too much for the container? And it is, of course, the latter. And so when the paradigm of circling, see, because if you took that 240 volts and you divided it between roughly 20 iPhones, well, then they would all be recharged. But if you put the 240 volts into one iPhone, it's too much. And one of the things where we have a big cult blind spot is that the grief and overwhelm, the entire cultural catastrophe that is the American cult, it can load up and load up and load up and load up. And then when one person expresses it to another person, it's too much for them to express and it's too much for the other person to deal with. Everything that's wrong with the cult, all the injustices, etc. However, with the paradigm of circling, we don't ask for one person to hold the circle. It's probably a minimum of 5, and in some cases, it may need to be 7. In some cases, it may need to be the entire community. However, the energy that emerges on the inside, when a person is experiencing or observing a strong upsurge of energy that needs to be expressed at an intensity that an individual cannot hold, they can press the circling button on the app. This invites a dialogue. How urgent is the circle? You know, a slow volcano that's, erupting and needs to be spoken, well, you've often got 24 hours, maybe 72 hours, at least 4 or 5 hours. It's not something that has to be screamed out or heard immediately. But so you've got some time. Occasionally, you really need something immediately. But you get asked, when does this need to occur by at the latest? And so you answer, now, 20 minutes, an hour, 5 hours, the next 3 days. When does it need to take place? How many people are needed to hold the circle? Do they have to include or be specific people, or can anyone respond? And so you fill this protocol out, and then you press, the circling, and the relevant people get the message that a circle is needed to contain the energy. Because what's destructive, all energy is creative and destructive depending on its intensity and how many people are holding it. And so one of the biggest areas that we suppress and control energy is simply by mandating. You take a person and their therapist. I've been with many therapists where I wanted to express something, but I was worried about the therapist because they're only one person. It's easy to send a discharge that's too heavy for one person, but you cannot one person cannot knock over, 70 people, even in a very big energy. And it tends to revitalize the community if it can be absorbed as microdoses of energy and emotion in a large circle. It's not a jet energy, it's diffuse. So the protocol of circling is taught as you join the community. And it's a powerful technique that in constellation therapy, it's sometimes used a little bit, but not in this way. It's something that I'm very much looking forward to experiencing. And one of the reasons that circling is important for sensitive people is that they often pick up the energy of the entire group that nobody is dealing with. Nobody's owning that energy. And so it's an energy that's looking for an outlet. And the sensitive person has the most porous membrane. And so the energy of the entire group will tend to progress and move through the most sensitive members of the group. However, it may have the least to do with the most sensitive people in the group. And so it's kind of like an energy gets produced and sent around the group looking for a home. It's produced by the group. And it's often produced by the most insensitive people. But the sensitive person reacts and picks it up the loudest. Now, if they give voice to it in a psychologically illiterate group, it is presumed that the energy originated with the sensitive. But it's actually being transmitted by the most insensitive to the sensitive because the most insensitive is in denial and repression of large volumes of energy that ripple out and affect. And so it's very important that sensitives be honored as their antennas, as their role as the antenna of the psyche for what is in fact a group dynamic that is being gifted to the group by the sensitive.